Hi, lovelies. Lisa here, and it is June 30th, which means that we are pretty much at the end of this towering month. It's 7:30 now, so technically, uh, I have 4.5 more hours of towery goodness. But we're narrowing in on the final throes of this month of really focused engagement with this card, with reading the tower in my life moment by moment, reading my life in the tower moment by moment. That interpretive give and take. I'm not going to wrap everything up with a neat little bow, but there are some final things that I want to say, and these are things that really have come up today, have really become clear today. Thanks largely to a Dharma talk that I gave this morning, and then I sat with the prisoners that I work with, my amazing Dharma brothers behind bars. So I had a strong dose of thinking about the Dharma today, and so that's in my heart and in my mind, and being with my two different sanghas, my sangha here in Eugene, and then my sangha, my much smaller sangha, um, uh, in Salem at the prison. Just that kind of connection brought things kind of to light, clarified things, let things gurgle up, bubble up. So I wanted to share a few images, just some thinkings about decks. Just because it's fun and it's lovely, I wanted to show my Praeger Tarot. This is a 1982 deck that Stuart Kaplan released with AGM. I have the German edition of it that I got off eBay, and I think I've at least showed this off in a video before. I haven't really done a review of it because I haven't worked with it. But the thing about this deck, so Kaplan based it on, I don't know who drew it. It's not a historical deck. Kaplan connects it with Chaldean astrology, this sort of branch of this esoteric, or I don't know if it's esoteric, but this branch of Christianity I know almost nothing about. He talks about geomancy, so it's part of the Eastern Church. He connects it with that. He talks about also Prague 19th century tarot decks. What he says in the little white book, or the little yellowed book, it doesn't seem to have anything to do with the deck that he actually produced. So my guess, and I'm picking off of what Rachel Pollack says about this in her book, The New Tarot. My guess is that just some artist made this deck and Stuart Kaplan produced it. I love this artwork. It's so freaking adorable. This kind of Marseille style imagery. But just, it's just, I don't know. It floats my boat in a way I can't even quite explain. The cards they're bigger than poker size, but smaller than tarot. They're sort of as wide as a tarot card, but squatter. And they're just so lovely. So this is a 54 card deck, not uncommon in the 19th century to cut down playing card decks, or 18th century too, or tarot decks, so that you remove some of the pips. So in this deck, you have ace, 2, 3, 4, and then the 4 royal cards, the 4 court cards, but you don't have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's a 54 card deck with all 22 trumps and then these truncated 4 suits. And there are card games in Austria, in Prague, in Germany, that I think probably to this day that they still play a version of. They play with a tarot deck that has 54 cards. They play a card game. I know nothing more about that than what I just said. That is the sum total of my knowledge. But anyway, look at this death card. Beautiful temperance and the devil. I mean, you can tell this is like I think you can tell that this is a modern rendition of things. So we'll come back to that card, and I'm not gonna show too many. I just, just for fun, I love this moon, creepy children, world. And then just to get a sense, that you have familiar imagery connecting the swords with air. And then we get the discs connected. That's interesting. That sort of balance connected with wealth. I love this periwinkle blue. Oops. And then cups, lots of water. Just such a pretty deck, isn't it? Isn't it cheery? So I really am fire with the wands or batons. So I really want to play with this deck. I had in my mind as part of my work with playing cards to work with the tarot of Prague. So the Tower. Why? I mean, I wanted to show you this cute little deck, but also this particular version of the Tower card with this sort of flame that's just this panel of flame flipping the lid of the Tower reminded me of this saying in Buddhism. And it's a saying that goes back to very ancient writings in the Theravadan canon, the earliest written scriptures associated with the historical Buddha. And the saying is that we should take up our spiritual practice as if our hair is on fire. So practice like your hair's on fire, right? Life is short. This human life is precious and brief. And we don't want to waste a single moment. We don't want to waste a single moment. So practice like your hair is on fire, right? I just thought of how the Tower, among other things, is about that realization that, oh my God, holy shit, something's fucked up. I got to do something about it, right? The cataclysm that the Tower represents really is a kind of, potentially, a moment of spiritual awakening, a certain kind of awakening. Maybe not an awakening that's like, here's the answer, but an awakening that says, there's a big fucking problem. My hair's on fire. Where's the water that's going to put it out? I've talked a lot about how, just in terms of the kind of archetypal imagery and the relation to the 6, because the Tower is 16, it's 10 plus 6. The 6 imagery, how the Tower is really like fire meeting water. So it's like my hair's on fire. How do I freaking put it out? Heaven meeting the ground. How do I take this insight that there is something wrong, and how do I bring it down, bring it to earth, bring it into my embodied existence? Now, in Zen practice, in Buddhist practice, there's another kind of set of ideas that are really helpful. And the Sanskrit, or no, actually, I guess the Pali, which is another ancient Indian language, the language that the earliest scriptures attributed to the Buddha are written in. So it sounds a lot like Sanskrit, but it's slightly different. In Pali, there are 2 terms. One term is the term for that sense of my hair's on fire, and that term is Samvega. Am I getting that right? Let me just double check that. Sorry, I was momentarily really doubting myself. Yes, it's Samvega. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. But Samvega is a term that apparently kind of has 3 different meanings to it. And it's the feelings that came up when the historical Buddha, the story of Shakyamuni Buddha, before he was Shakyamuni Buddha, when he wasn't yet awakened, he was still just Prince Siddhartha. And, he grew up living in the lap of luxury, enclosed in his palace. His father really wanted to protect him, to keep him safe from harm. And also a prophecy had said, your son will either be a great religious leader or a great king. And his father's like, I want him to be a king. His father was a great ruler. So I want him to be a great ruler. So I thought, I gotta make everything good for my son, so he doesn't ever develop that wanderlust and spiritual seeking stuff. Let's just make him happy here. So Siddhartha is living in the palace, spending his childhood years, his teens, his 20s in the palace, and then he goes out beyond its gates because he's curious about the real world. He's like, this can't be all there is. What's out there? And he sees, when he's out of the gates, he sees for the first time ever, he sees someone who's ill. He's like, what's that? He's with his driver. His driver's like, well, that's someone who's sick, my lord. And then he sees someone who is old, gray, wrinkled. He's like, what's that? Well, that's old age, my lord. And then he sees a corpse. What the hell is that? Well, that's someone who's dead. So he sees sickness, age, and death, and he's like, oh my God, I gotta change my life, right? Samvega is the word that expresses the complex of feelings we have when we're woke, right? It's like, holy hell, things are not right. And so there are like at least 3 different pieces of that feeling. There's the feeling of like, I have been going about it all wrong. Like, what am I doing? This recognition that what you're doing just doesn't make any sense, that you're living as if, I don't know, as if you'll live forever. You're living as if this is okay. You're living as if there isn't suffering in the world. You're living as if the goods that you have don't come at the expense of the poor people. You're living as if there's no oppression, there's no suffering, that all is A-okay. And guess what? It isn't. So you wake up to that. And Samvega is also this sense of, wow, I've been complicit with all of this. I've been complacent. I've been blind. And this recognition that, you can't be complacent anymore, that your blindness contributes to the suffering out there. So not only do you realize like what I'm doing is not going to help me, but you realize that you're in doing what you've been doing, you're complicit with the world being messed up. And lastly, Samvega describes this sense of urgency. Like, now that I know this, I gotta change right now. I was saying earlier today that, I think of that sense of urgency like the moment at the end of When Harry Met Sally, when we've watched an entire movie, like 2 hours, and 12 years in the life of this man and this woman who are friends, and then their friendship gets compromised by romance, and then they're estranged, and they've gone through this whole chunk of time together. And Billy Crystal finally, at the end of the movie, he's like, I love Sally. I want to be with Sally. And so he starts running. He starts running to go find Sally, right? I mean, probably you all know this story, but if you don't, I'm giving away the ending. He starts running towards Sally, right? And it doesn't make sense. That urgency doesn't make sense. But when he finds Sally, when Billy Crystal finds Meg Ryan, he says something like, when you realize who you want to spend the rest of your life with, you realize you want the rest of your life to begin right now. That's the urgency of Samvega, of this sense that my hair is on fire. I can't live the way I've been living. Not just for me, but for the whole world. I can't be complicit in structures, in patterns, in habits that are harmful, not just to me, but harmful. And realizing that now, I gotta change. I gotta change. And that sense is your hair being on fire. But the other part of the picture, and this also relates to the story of Siddhartha. So he goes outside the palace gates. He sees sickness, old age, and death. He's like, shit. Or he says whatever the Pali equivalent of shit is. And then he sees a 4th sight. The 3 sights are sickness, old age, and death. And Buddhists often say, they talk about the 3 sights, the 4 sights. These things that archetypally, this moment of becoming aware. The 4th sight he sees is a monk, a religious seeker. And he goes, yeah, I want what he's got. I want what she's having. I'm like got Harry and Sally references crowding out my consciousness. I want what he's having. So there's Samvega, and then there's this other emotion, this other set of feelings that the Pali scriptures talk about, and that is Posada. And again, I don't speak Pali, I don't read Pali, I'm probably mispronouncing these words, but it's Samvega and Posada. And Posada is that clear conviction. It's what Siddhartha, what arises in his heart when he sees someone who he knows is living the better way. There is a path, there is a way out. So that's like Harry waking up to the fact not just that he wants love, but that he wants Sally. Urgency, goal. So our hair is on fire, but at the base is that water that we know will quench us. Samvega and Posada, the spiritual journey, which begins with this sense of holy shit, and then with that sense, this equally strong conviction that, yeah, there is a way. I may not know all the details yet, but I know I can point myself toward it. The start of spiritual seeking, which my guess is that if you're watching me today, you know what I'm talking about. Because you know your hair's been on fire and your heart has been inflamed and impassioned with this cool balm of Posada, with a conviction that there's a better way. The tower is also about that. So the last deck I want to look at, maybe predictably, can you guess? It's Robert M. Place's Buddha Tarot, which is out of print. I'm sorry. It's out of print. It's now going for a lot on eBay. I keep my eyes open for it. I got my deck on the secondary market. I was lucky to get it with a book. The book, I don't have it around here. The booklet that comes with the deck is not so helpful. But Robert M. Place's book on the Buddha Tarot, the Buddha Tarot Companion, is fantastic. It's fantastic, like all of his books are. It's not just about this deck, it's also about tarot. And he's so Robert M. Place, right? Because he thinks about how to translate the tarot into other arenas, whether it's vampire stories or stories of saints, or, early modern alchemical philosophy. He's always thinking about what is the 78, what is the tarot at its heart. And it's just so beautiful. Anyway, he, I had this idea about doing a whole series on Buddhism and tarot, and I never quite did it. I did a few videos, but I emailed him, and he's very kind, and I told him what I was doing and how much I love the Buddha Tarot, and he said, this is my favorite deck, the Buddha Tarot. He said, there was something, he was very attached to this deck, or it was a deck that he felt very special about because he felt like he really nailed it with this deck. The 22 trumps go through the life of Siddhartha, and I'm not gonna. I love the artwork too, just the illustration, and it's more tied not to see there's Siddhartha seeing both the sage and the old man, so that's about his journey beyond the palace gates and seeing 2 out of the 4 sights. This deck is more tied to a Tibetan vision of Buddhism, especially in the 4 minors, but it's still a deck that just really is really, really cool. I shouldn't say but. It's a deck that's really cool. I'm not a Tibetan Buddhist. I'm a Zen Buddhist. Anyway, I love the star card. This is the star card is Buddha in his moment of awakening, seeing the morning star, and this alignment of chakras. Okay, so the tower in this deck is called the Flaming Disc. And what it's about is, the Buddha, or Shakyamuni, he sees the 4 sights and he's like, all right, I'm going to find a better way. And he spends 6 years, and I won't go through that whole story, but he ends up going through, really ascetic and self-mortifying practices and yoga, and he becomes a master of all of the arts of seeking of his day. And all these teachers he studies with are like, you have surpassed my teachings. You come, stay, become my master. I'll be your student. And he's like, no, no, no. Thank you. Thank you kindly. I haven't found it yet. I've got Posada though. I've got conviction. I know I'm on my way. And, he finally realizes that he needs to be kind to this body of his, not to fast and go through self mortifying ascetic rituals. And so he takes in some nourishment. He's given a bowl of rice milk by a what we would, in Christian myth we would call the Good Samaritan. And then he goes and he finds a place to sit. And he's going to sit until he's awakened. The culmination of practicing like your hair's on fire is, I'm not getting up until I crack this nut. So as he's sitting, the Lord Mara, who is often described as the devil, and in fact in Place's deck, Mara, in Place's deck, there we go. Mara is in position 15 as the devil. But Mara is just really the principle of this world, the world of the everyday, of practicality, of negotiating, of trying to figure it out. Like common sense. Mara's just Lord Practicality. And Mara's like, no, 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 no. It's not so good if you wake up. I gotta stop this. And so he's threatened. The smallness of his vision, of his heart, is threatened by the largeness of Siddhartha's aspiration. And this may make some sense too. Like if you've ever found yourself striving, and my guess is if you're watching this video, you kind of know what I'm talking about. If you've ever found yourself striving, seeking, and those around you are like, what is wrong with you? I remember when I went on my first silent retreat, a friend of mine was like, why would you want to sit in silence for 10 days, Lisa? This is like a totally valid question. The world can just like look askance at you, like make you doubt yourself, right? You know what I mean? So Mara's like, don't do this, don't do this. And he hurls, there are different versions of the story. Robert M. Place's version is, the one he uses in this image, is the last thing Mara does is hurls a flaming disc at Siddhartha, which then is transformed into a wreath of flowers. Ways that this is talked about is he hurls thunderbolts, and the thunderbolts along the way to Siddhartha, they turn into flowers. Anything he hurls at Siddhartha, any threat, just is not just neutralized, but is revealed as something beautiful. And finally, he hurls the biggest weapon he has. It's the weapon of shame. He says to Siddhartha, who do you think you are to imagine that you can be enlightened and sit in the seat of the ancient Buddhas? Who do you think you are? Like, what's so fucking special about you, right? And what Siddhartha does, and you can see it in this image, this is a famous mudra, that the earth-touching gesture, mudra just means gesture, of the Buddha. He lowers his left hand. He lowers his left hand. Yes. And, things are reversed in the camera, and then, anyway. He lowers his left hand and touches the ground. He says, let the earth be my witness. And there are different versions of the story. And in some versions of the story, it's like the spirit of the earth comes up and says, yes, this guy has got the goods. In lifetimes past, he did this. He's purified. He's worthy to be here. But the way I hold this story, this mythical story of awakening, is that, the Buddha to be, Shakyamuni to be, Siddhartha, Lord Siddhartha, can only do what he's doing because he is deeply connected to the whole world. It's not just his awakening. In touching the earth, He's grounding himself in the truth that all of us waking up requires that all of us wake up. There's no individual awakening because the self is interconnected to all things. So he touches that taproot, the earth itself, um, as witness to the fact that this is not a single solitary little self, small self, reaching for the heavens. This is life. This is the whole world. This is awakening embodied. It's that earth touching gesture that I think ultimately is where I want to end with my Tower month, is to say that when our hair is on fire, we touch the earth. We come down to earth. We remember that we are not alone, that none of us does this life alone, that our sense of singleness and solitariness, our sense of isolation, that this is the core of our suffering, and it is illusion. The whole earth, sky, trees, air, birds, bees, humans, snakes, crawly insects, the whole freaking universe sits here with me as I try to find my wholeness and my peace. I'm not in it alone. So that's ultimately what I want to end with the idea of the tower bringing these structures down to the ground. This is the earth-touching mudra of awakening. Yeah. So that's what I've got for my Tower month. That's where I'm ending. I also wanted to just follow up a little bit on the announcement I made yesterday. I've thought a little bit more about the details and looked at my calendar, which I hadn't done when I made yesterday's video. And I realized that the best time for me to do this class would be actually to start on September 28th and go through for the next 4 weeks, which puts us, I think, what did I say to myself, October 19th? I'll drop an image in a second. But I'm limiting this class to 20. First of all, I don't know if I don't know if I can even fill a class. It's not going to be cheap, cheap, cheap. I'm going to price it at what it's, I think, worth, and think about the effort I'm going to be putting into it and the ways it's linked to the other kind of teaching I do and how I price that. I will definitely be offering an early bird special. So the class starts September 28th. If you sign up by August 1st, then the course will be $50 off the regular price. The course fee includes a reading before the class begins. So the sooner people sign up, the better. And I'll schedule a Skype reading with you. And that reading is kind of to just see where you are. So we have sort of a baseline and some themes that you might find yourself wanting to work with in the class itself. In the class, I'll introduce all the key elements of mindful tarot, including a way to really think about the tarot deck as a whole. The work of the class will be complementary to the book I just wrote, my book, Mindful Tarot, but it won't be just a repeat of that. It won't be stuff that you can just get from reading the book, but if you read the book and take the class, you'll get a really full picture of things. But you certainly can take the class without ever reading the book. We'll be learning some basic mindfulness practices, and we'll do a little bit of practice together. And because I want to keep the class small, that means that each hour and a half in the 4 weeks that we meet will be intimate, and it'll be possible. We'll use video conferencing technology so that we can all see each other and that we can really interact and have questions. And if you have to miss one of the classes, if the timing doesn't work, it will be recorded, so you can do the class on your own time. But if you can, the class will be as much like a regular face-to-face class as I can make it. And then throughout the class, I'll offer feedback on the work you do, including some real feedback at the end for those in the class who want to actually write up a reflection based on a mindful tarot reading of their own. So, I've been a teacher for a long, long time in different settings, whether it's mindfulness or, academic subjects or the Dharma. Um, and so I will bring all of what I know and all of my love of teaching to this class. So I hope that for some of you, this sounds appealing. I hope that I'll get to know some of you, 20 of you maybe, um, really well over the course of those 4 weeks. So feel free to email me with any questions that you have. I'll certainly be posting in various places more information about the course over the next few weeks. Yeah, I'm really excited. So September 28th. Yeah, okay. That's all I got for now. As always, thank you for joining me. And thank you for your practice.